One of the most important and effective ways to heal yourself naturally, whether it be physically or emotionally, is to learn how to identify and release your triggers. In this video, you will learn how emotional and physical triggers are formed subconsciously based on traumatic experiences, how they can create triggers that follow you throughout the rest of your life unless you can identify it and therefore release it yourself. And that's the other thing we're going to look at. Two things you can do to identify the trigger and the connection between the trigger and the original situation or the original conflict or trauma, and then use that to deactivate the connection, to release the trigger so that you're no longer getting triggered in that way anymore. You can feel safe now so that you can regulate and calm down your nervous system now, so that you can find that inner peace and that self-love now without being haunted by your past everywhere you go. So here's the thing. When you experience a traumatic or just emotionally distressing situation, two things happen. One is that your subconscious mind takes a snapshot of that situation, where it basically records everything that is present in that moment as a potential connection or even lead up to what happened. And so it saves it in your subconscious mind, in your memory, but deep down, but often so deep down that it's buried within your memory and you are not consciously aware of this. But your subconscious mind is what's always active and what's always working and basically keeping you alive, right? It's pumping the blood throughout your body. It's what helps you digest your food without you even knowing. It keeps you breathing, keeps your heart beating. But that's not all. It is also constantly observing and assessing every situation that you're in to see if there are any potential threats to your survival. It's looking out for you. It wants to keep you safe. So when you have that traumatic or emotionally distressing moment that caught you off guard, it takes this snapshot so that it can use that information to potentially protect you from getting into a similar situation in the future. So for example, let's say you're walking down a dark street at night. Maybe you cut through an alleyway, but it just so happens that that wasn't the best decision for that moment because you end up getting robbed, God forbid anything else. So what may happen though is that from then on, every time you find yourself in or at the entranceway of a dark alley, or every time it's a dark night and you're walking alone, your subconscious mind notices that and it picks it up as a potential warning for what could come next. Next time you find yourself in a similar situation, you're walking alone at night, there's a dark street, it recognizes that similarity and you may feel triggered, right? Even before going down that alleyway, you may start to feel short of breath. You may start to feel anxious and scared. You may kind of freeze and just not be able to continue walking. Or you could have, an upset stomach or a headache. Your body begins to react physically or emotionally because of the memory of the last time or that one time when you did go down an alleyway just like this. So as this feeling of anxiety comes on, or you get this headache, or you feel sick to your stomach, whatever it is, this could potentially lead to you making a different decision this time and deciding to not go down that dark alleyway, preventing you from getting in a similar situation as you were before, right? So this is how the subconscious works. It's looking for situations that are similar to the ones that you've gone through before that have caused you harm. And in this example, it's great and we are thankful for it. However, what happens is, as it takes that snapshot, it could record things that maybe are not actually precursors to a similar event happening. For example, maybe the person who mugged you or was involved in that same situation, in that example I just gave, maybe they were using a certain cologne. And you may not even have been consciously aware of this in the moment, but your subconscious mind could even save that and record that smell as part of a threat, as potential danger. So next thing you know, you're just walking down the street one day. It's a sunny day. It's in the middle of the day. Maybe you're even with your friends. It's a very different situation and there's no potential harm there. However, somebody walks by you who's wearing that cologne and the same reaction happens. You get triggered. You're having fun. Everything was light and friendly. You're chatting with your friends. You're laughing. And suddenly you start to panic. Suddenly you feel your heart beat faster and you feel like you're going to have a panic attack, or you start to feel sick, or you just stop in your tracks and you don't know why. You just have such a strong feeling of fear. And it's all because you smelled that cologne that your subconscious mind had saved as a potential threat to your life. And it's basically a warning sign for you to be careful, right? And not get in the same situation. But it's not the same situation in this case. And it's really not necessary at all. But your subconscious mind doesn't notice the differences. It's not assessing all of the elements of the current situation to judge whether it is similar enough to that day that you had that traumatic experience. It's just recognizing the smell. That's it. So in this case, instead of actually helping you and potentially preventing you from getting into a life-threatening situation or just an unpleasant situation that you would not like to experience, it could actually just end up interrupting your day. It could kind of set you down a negative spiral of fear or feeling sick in your body. Maybe you had plans for that day, maybe you had a meeting, but now you just end up going home because you don't feel well. Or now you're stressing all day. It can set you down a negative spiral, or if anything, interrupt that lovely moment that you're having with your friends, because now suddenly you're tense and your body starts reacting, but you don't know why. There's no threat in sight. So not only does your subconscious mind record an element or sometimes multiple elements from that situation, but it also uses that to help warn you to be careful or avoid situations in the future that could be similar, that could lead to similar circumstances. So while this is important in many situations, and it's not something you would ever want to shut off, and it's not something you should be angry with or try to get rid of, right? But what we want to do is help our subconscious mind filter out the triggers, the warnings that are no longer applicable to our life or that are disproportionate to the situation. So what I'm going to share with you now are 2 things that you can do to begin to identify these triggers, identify what the connections are that your subconscious has made, so that you can help it to let go of the triggers that are no longer needed, that are no longer relevant to your life, and are just disrupting it. So the first thing you can do is begin to keep track of these reactions. Maybe you have a little notebook that you take with you, or you use your phone, whatever works for you, but have something where you can record when these things happen, so that you can begin to connect the dots and figure out what the commonalities are, because then you may be able to identify the trigger. For example, if you have that experience where you're walking down the street that day with your friends, when you get back home, I would jot down what were the elements that were present in that moment when you felt triggered and you suddenly felt sick to your stomach and panicked. Okay? You were walking down a street. You were with your friends. It was a sunny day. Maybe you remember walking by someone who had really strong cologne. Maybe you didn't take that much notice of it, but as you are now going back and replaying it through your mind, you realize, oh yeah, and I remember smelling this cologne. And so you just write all those things down. Do that every time this same sort of trigger takes place. When you start having these same feelings, you feel triggered in the same way. If it happens again the next day or the next week or the next month, go back to that notebook and add on, okay, now on this date, I was in this place with these people, and maybe the situation was completely different, but the only thing that correlated with the previous experience was the smell of a man's cologne. As you continue to do this, you will start to notice those commonalities, right? and you may be able to begin to make the connections for yourself. And that's so powerful, because when you make that connection, now you're aware of it, right? Now it's not subconscious anymore. It's been brought into the light of your conscious mind. And sometimes just by doing this, just by becoming aware of it and making that connection, sometimes that's just enough. Sometimes that's all you need. And now the trigger is basically deactivated and the reminder is no longer necessary. It's like your subconscious mind doesn't need to remember this and keep reminding you of it. You don't need that reminder anymore. Now, sometimes there could be more than one trigger, more than one connection. Your subconscious mind, when it took that snapshot, it may have not only recorded, the smell of the cologne, it may have recorded also just going down alleys in general, right? So you may still notice that the next time you go down an alley, you have the same reaction, even though you have kind of deactivated the trigger related to the cologne. So you may now have to work with that, right? It could be multiple things. So that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is if you already know that you have gone through something traumatic, or you had some experience that is affecting your life today and how you feel. Maybe not on an everyday basis, but in certain situations. So then you can go back to the situation specifically and write down, what was involved, what were all the elements that were present in that moment. Was it a sunny day? Like, how was the weather? Who was there? Were there any smells? Were there any noises? How was I feeling that day in that moment, particularly, if you can remember that? Where was I? These are all things that could play into it. Was I eating anything? Was I drinking anything? Sometimes this can be the cause of food allergies, even, or certain reactions that we have to food. Because when we got X news, or when X situation happened that really rocked us to our core and caught us off guard, we were drinking coffee or we were eating bread. And so now we have this reaction to coffee that we didn't have before. And every time we drink coffee, we feel a certain way, or your skin may react. You may get a skin reaction. This can happen sometimes with things like gluten. People have certain reactions. It's not necessarily that your body just doesn't, jive with something within that food. It could be that there's a biological, psychological connection there because of a certain experience that you've had in your life. The tricky thing is, this could have been something that happened at a very young age or a long time ago. So you may have to really go back and think about it. Or it could be something sometimes so traumatic that you don't remember it at all, and it's been buried in your subconscious mind. If that's the case and you can't really think of anything, you can't remember any specific situation, then I would suggest using the first technique, the first method that I explained, which is where you use the triggers to find the connection, right? You use the feelings that you're getting from the triggers to go back and see if that can help you become conscious of it and make the connection. But if you do know the situation, or you have or you suspect certain situation could be playing into why you're reacting or feeling a certain way in certain situations, then you can also go back to the situation in and of itself and then compare it to the times where you have felt triggered, or use it as a guide now moving forward for whenever you do suddenly feel like anxious and panicky, or sick to your stomach, or just you have this looming kind of feeling of fear, especially when it really seems to come out of nowhere, right? Then go back to that, I had written down that the weather was rainy. Is it raining right now? No. I was with my sister. Is my sister here with me now? No. I had written down that I was feeling like I'm not enough. Am I feeling like I'm not enough right now? Yes. Sometimes it's like the feeling, it's an internal thing that your subconscious mind has recorded as basically a potential threat, because that's how you were feeling in that moment or that day when this situation happened. The subconscious mind is so powerful. I really encourage you to do this. And when you do, come back and comment below and let us know how it went for you. I'd love to hear your stories. I had a very transformative, eye-opening experience with this recently, where something had happened with my husband a few years ago. While I was driving one of our cars, there was this incident, really kind of rocked things for me and threw me off guard, and just led me to doubt things for a while after, doubt myself and my own self-worth. That's how I perceived it, based on, feelings and deep-seated beliefs that I already had about myself. But I've really been working on, those beliefs and my self-worth and self-love and things. Yet I noticed that my body was reacting in a certain way. I was experiencing certain physical symptoms regularly. And I couldn't figure out why this was still going on, because I knew by that point that it was related to my relationship with him, but more so my relationship with myself and how that was being reflected on how I perceived certain things about my relationship. And so I had been working on that and doing all the inner work, yet I realized I was still sometimes getting triggered. And it wasn't until I started doing this that I realized that the car that we were in that day when we had that argument basically activated all of these feelings and this reaction within me. We had the argument in that car, and I realized the car was sitting out in front of my house every day. Like, we still have the same car. We don't drive it every day because we have another car as well, the one I'm sitting in right now, actually. But it's here in front of the house, and I was seeing it every day. So even though I wasn't consciously aware of that, there was this one subconscious thing constantly there that I was unaware of, that was constantly setting off, the alarm bells, basically, in my mind, in my subconscious mind, in my body. And it was causing physical reactions. And it wasn't until I realized that this was happening, thought back to the situation and went through this process of what was involved, what was present, this day when this happened. And I realized, of course, we were in that car and I see it here every day. So it must be what's reactivating things. And so my first thought after that was like, okay, let's get rid of the car. And to be honest, I still would like to sell it. But at first I was like, we need to get it off the property. I just need to stop looking at it, which, could help as well. But up until that point, like, I hadn't consciously made the connection. So I wasn't looking at it thinking about that day or that argument, but subconsciously that was basically happening. So what I did is I basically spoke to my subconscious mind and I let it know that I had made the connection. And therefore, I didn't need its help anymore. I didn't need the reminders from my subconscious mind, because I'm now aware of it myself. That really seemed to be the missing link, because now that I've done that, I'm not getting triggered anymore in that way with that particular situation. So you can think of it as the captain of the ship is your conscious mind, and the subconscious mind is the crew below. So your conscious mind is the captain of the ship, and it's up to you being the one who has control and awareness of your conscious mind, to send the commands to the subconscious mind. So once you know what's going on, now it's basically your responsibility, and you can influence the subconscious mind, but you need to be specific and direct. If you really have identified the correct trigger and connection and originating experience, and you get this right, it will work. And if it doesn't work, then something was off, right? Then either that wasn't the trigger, or there's another trigger, there's another reminder, something else that the subconscious mind took a snapshot of, or perhaps that wasn't even the originating conflict, the originating experience where this trigger came from, right? Maybe it was something else that initiated this trigger that your subconscious mind has now developed as a form of protection. And in that case, you can just go back through the process again and, keep trying this with different triggers, with different connections, different elements that you think could be the connection, and until you get the correct one. But there's no reason to continue carrying this around with you throughout your life and continue living in this way. You can feel safer now. You can feel more calm now if you release this trigger.